Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name is Debbie. Welcome to my channel. If you've never been here before, we are streaming music producer Phil Spector's 2007 murder trial for the death of Lana Clarkson. Hey, Judy. Hey, Jill. Hey, Jennifer. Welcome in, everybody. It's great to have you here. Like I said, we are on part 93. And Judy, my wonderful mod that I forget to thank, she does so much around here. Hang on, I got a doggo begging for a cookie. She gives us wonderful little trivia tidbits every morning. In 2003, Spector's sons. Where was it? I've been looking all over for this thing. Thank you, dear. In 2003, Spector's sons Gary and Dante relate tales of forced isolation in the late 70s and go on to accuse the famous producer of blindfolding Gary and then molesting them both. Ew! Why blindfold? I mean, they knew who was doing it. Why blindfold them? Ugh. Had he lived, Phil Spector would have been eligible for parole in 2024. I do too, Jill. I really, really love it. It's great. It's informative. It's a great way to start the stream. I love it. I love, love, love it. My favorite, though, is still the Batman. I can't even get it out. It's so funny every time I think of it. Phil Spector dressed up as Batman and walked around his house in the dark. That is always going to be my favorite. Okay, I found a short right before we started. And of course, because I found this short, I am not ready with the court TV feed. But you guys love me. You know, the ADHD sometimes takes over, and it did this morning, of course. I was going to send this to a bunch of people on Messenger, and then I decided, no. I'm just going to show it to everybody.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. You guys need to stop. You understand? I've had enough of it. You got it? Do you understand me? Thank you. See you later. Take care. Excuse me.
I don't know why that tickles me so much. Dude just rolls up on a couple street cats fighting, gets them to stop, and just like stand there with a confused look on their faces. I thought it was funny. Okay. We were still on Devra Robitaille's. I know, right? They literally stopped and he told them to stop and then just stood there with a confused look on their face. Like, why is this human talking to us. I think that's probably why they stopped. I don't think they stopped because he told them to. I think they were like, who is this human and why are they talking to us? I am so sorry, y'all. Inevitably, I will forget to do one of the steps that I need to do to get this stream started. And today it was to pull up the Court TV website. So I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay, so we were on part 2 of Deborah.
Yeah, the court's indulgence for us.
Hey, Nancy.
I'm just going to need your indulgence just for a moment, please.
StreamYard, what are you doing? Wake up. It's morning. It's time to work. Do your thing.
Now, Mr. Robitaille, as you sit in the witness stand today, you have a bias and a prejudice against Phil, don't you?
Absolutely not.
You would like to see the prosecution win this case, wouldn't you?
It's an objection argument.
Overruled. You can ask her that.
I can't answer that. I'm sorry. I haven't even thought about it. I don't think that way. I just want to say the truth, you know, and I was asked to come here and say what happened, so I'm saying what happened.
So you would never make a statement like, you hope you guys, referring to the DA's prosecution, are winning. You would never say something like that, would you?
Well, apparently I did, because you're pointing to where you think I said it in the transcript.
Well, you're right.
Okay, fine. Then I did say that.
And you said it in the interview in March of '07, didn't you? You said, I hope you guys are winning.
Can I just get to that?
No, I'm sorry.
All right. Oh, we have a line.
Certainly. 4 through 6.
Thank you.
I don't recall saying it, but
Well,
I may have. I may have been being sociable.
Well, he had a boy band in the 50s and 60s, so that makes 100% sense. Well, they didn't call them boy bands back then. And there may have been a woman in his band. I don't remember. I can't remember what it was called. But he had a band in the 50s and 60s.
being sociable? Did you believe that that was a sociable comment?
It's a joke, Mr. Rosen.
It's not a joke. A man's life is on the line, ma'am.
Okay.
That's what
Our
it's
argument is,
Let's get back to the point that we're discussing. Thank you.
For the record, page 80, line 4 through 6. Do you recall making the following statement at the interview with Divine and Freya in Fort Lauderdale in March of this year? Robitaille, I was going to say to you both, I'm glad you came back, because I was going to say, I hope you guys are winning, because, and that's the truth. You remember saying that?
well, Jackson,
No, I
Mr.
don't.
Rosen should read the rest
Oh, sure.
of
I'll
that
finish it.
answer, probably down to line 12.
Happy to.
All right.
I mean, somebody like Phil, I mean, I can say he was charming and charismatic, and I could say the music was amazing, which it was. Divine, yeah, Robitaille. I mean, it was very interesting, but you know, there is an uncrossable line, and he crossed the uncrossable line, and that was not okay. Do you remember providing those answers to those
I remember
questions?
exactly saying that, yes.
So you did tell them that you hoped they were winning, didn't you?
Apparently I did, yes.
And as a matter of fact, because you were trying to be sociable and you were trying to help the prosecution,
Jackson, that misstates the evidence. That's not what you said.
Sustain.
well, let me ask this. You really reached to give the two district attorney investigators what they wanted, didn't you?
Objection,
No.
argumentative.
Overruled.
They tracked me down on my vacation. I didn't want to come and testify. They actually tracked me down to Florida. I was staying at my mother's house. And when they first called me, I said I didn't want to talk to them. I didn't want to be involved in it. Didn't want anything to do with it. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know the trial was about to start. I hadn't been following it in the news. I wanted nothing to do with it. And then by the time they finally persuaded me to come and talk to them, I suppose, yes, I wanted them to win. I don't
I have had about enough of that squeaky ding dang chair. Somebody get the WD-40 and fix it.
think people should hurt other people.
Course indulgence for a minute.
All right.
Please. Mr. Dixon. I want to give Mr. Dixon a moment. The paginations are different.
Okay.
Do you recall providing the following answers to the following questions? Mr. Freya, I was. Ms. Devine, a few weeks ago. Ms. Robitaille, weeks ago? Exactly. So, and I'm really reaching to give you what you want. Ms. Devine, the detail. Ms. Robitaille, the details that you want, and. Do you recall providing those answers to those
I
questions?
don't have a clue what you're talking about. No, I'm sorry, I don't.
So you didn't speak the words, I'm really reaching to give you what you want. You didn't say that.
I don't recall it. And it doesn't make sense in how I would speak.
Very well.
And I don't know what they were referring to. Possibly we'd ordered a cup of coffee. I honestly don't know.
I now want to turn your attention to a different area, please. And that's an area that Mr. Dixon spent a little bit of time talking to you about here this morning. And I'm going to need your help on this a little bit. As I understand it, you gave an interview to a publication, is that correct?
I did, yes.
But actually, you gave more than one interview, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Since March of this year, you've actually given a series of interviews, haven't you?
Actually, no. Just one.
Well, Let's explore that. The first interview you gave, as I understand it, was an interview for a British paper called the Sunday Mail, correct?
That's right, yes.
And the interviewer, and I have it right here if you need to look at it. Okay, I have the complete interview. And the interview was a Caroline Graham, isn't that right?
That was 4 years ago.
Okay. That was in February 9th of '03, correct?
Yes,
Shortly after the incident, correct?
that's right.
And you were paid for that, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And you said you were paid $4,009. Actually, you were paid $5,000, weren't you?
I was talking about this interview, the recent one.
Well, let's start with
That
the
was what
old.
Mr. Dixon asked me about. So that was what I answered.
Let's start with the oldest interview, okay?
Yes.
Let's start with the interview of February 9th of the year 2003 with Caroline Graham from the Sunday Mail. You remember that?
I do, yes.
Okay. And as I understand it, you were paid $5,000 for that interview, weren't you?
That's right, yes.
And that interview was published, correct?
Yes.
And you then had another interview, didn't you, at a later time, and that was in this year, correct?
Yes.
So in 2004, you didn't give an interview, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
I-
How about 2005 or 2006? You don't know.
Well, I did. I was also interviewed by somebody for a book, but that was not paid. That was
Okay.
just.
Well, let's talk
So I don't
about
know what year that was.
let's talk about March of this year. So let's specifically talk about March 10th of this year.
Yes.
And I have that one too if you need to see it. Okay. By the way, I have them all, so if you need to look at them to refresh your memory, you let me know and I'll bring them up to you. Okay.
Thank you.
You gave an interview on March 10th of this year to Mick Brown from the Telegraph, correct?
Not this year, no.
Well,
I talked to Mick. The Mick Brown interview was years ago.
Yes.
Okay. You see the date up here? And because it's British, the month is first, and the month is second, the day is first.
Well, then
March
he-
10th of '07.
Yeah, but I didn't talk to him, so he must have used it from. How can?
Let's do it this way. When did you give your interview to Mick Brown from the Telegraph magazine? That was after the first one, correct?
Yes,
In
it was.
February.
Yes.
All right. And you indicated you weren't compensated for that, correct?
I was not compensated, and I know that it was at least 2.5 years ago because I was able to walk.
Okay. And your name appeared in that article, didn't it?
Yes.
Just
It
like
wasn't
in
an
a-
article, it was a book.
Okay, just like your name appeared in the Sunday Mail article, correct?
Yes.
And then you did another interview, didn't you?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, you actually did an interview, did you not, with a publication called The Globe, right?
That doesn't look familiar to me. But you know, it was through an agency, so the agency has the right to put it wherever they want to. So,
Roach, please.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you something.
yeah.
You see somebody, you see this here? You see somebody you know there?
Yep.
On the left-hand side, is there a person you know?
Yes, there is, but it says the first time I've seen this.
Okay, may I publish this to the jury?
Yes.
And Ms. Robitaille, what is the date on this particular publication?
It's May 21st, 2007.
Okay, I don't know.
May
Can-
21st, 2007.
All right. And your picture's in here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you're quoted in here, correct? You see
Yes,
your
I
name.
gave the interview to an agency, not to the Globe.
I see. Were you paid for
So
this?
this is the one that I spoke of earlier. It was for an agency.
The one you got paid $4,009?
That's correct.
So if my math is correct, to date,
Yes.
and we haven't talked about the fourth one with the Daily Mail, we'll get to that in a moment, but for the Sunday Mail, you were paid $5,000,
Right.
and for the Globe, you were paid $4,009, correct?
No, the 4 was for the mail.
Okay, so as you sit here today, you've made $9,000 plus off of interviews that you have given to publications about your story, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And you actually gave a fourth interview, and that was to the Daily Mail with either, and I apologize, I can't read the name on the copy I have. It's either Ron or Don Freeman and or Natalie Clark. Correct?
Right. That was the agent. That was the agency.
And so there's at least 4 publications where your story appears, correct?
Yes.
When you gave interviews at this, well, let me back up. Let me ask this way. How much of this trial have you been following either on television or in the news media?
Very little.
But you've been following some, correct?
Some, yes.
Did you see Dorothy Melvin testify?
Yes, I did.
Did you see Melissa Grosvenor testify?
I think I was out of town. I may have seen a bit of the beginning of it, but I didn't follow every single day.
Okay, no, I understand. Stephanie Jennings?
I did see her, yes.
Okay. And, court's indulgence, one moment? Yes. And how about, I was having, as Mr. Jackson says from time to time, a lapse here. And how about Diane Ogden or Diane Ogden-Halder? Did you see her testify?
I don't remember hers, no.
Okay. You've read from time to time, I don't mean every moment of every day, but from time to time you've read articles about the testimony in this trial, correct?
Not very much, to be honest.
Okay, but some, right?
A little, yes.
And you've watched TV from time to time, and you've listened to it sometimes if it comes up on the radio. You may not be searching for it, but you hear commentary about it, correct?
Actually, I don't listen to the radio.
Okay. But from watching these ladies testify,
Yes.
first of all, by the way, they testified before you testified, correct?
They did, yes.
And you heard their testimony, correct?
I did.
So you were aware of the substance of their testimony prior to you being sworn in as a witness today, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
May I have the court's indulgence for a
Yes.
moment?
Thank you. Redirect, pardon.
Thank you. When's the first interview that you gave where you told someone that Phil Spector put a gun to your head 2 different times? When was that?
The first interview was in, I think it was 2000, well, it was when it first happened, when the incident that we're on trial here to talk about, when that first happened, it was right after it.
Right after?
Yes.
Right after Lana Clarkson was killed, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that would have been way before there'd ever been a trial or testimony broadcast or any newspaper articles.
That's correct.
So way before you saw any of the people that Mr. Rosen asked you about, you told an interviewer exactly what happened to you in these 2 different incidents. Is that
Yes.
correct?
And it was the lady that had been staying at my house when the second incident had happened, Sharon. She's the one that contacted me and set it up because she was there.
So she was the person that set up this first interview was the person who you came home to after the second incident,
That's correct.
where you described to her what happened
Exactly.
at the time that that second incident happened.
Exactly.
You used well, let me first clarify something. We're talking about transcripts, right?
Yes.
And you had a chance in my office to review your interviews with the DA investigators. Is that
That's right,
correct?
yes.
And there are 2 separate transcripts. Is that correct?
I only was aware of one.
Okay.
I read one.
But was it your understanding that one of the transcript that you read
Yes.
was recorded? You weren't aware of it at first? when they were recording at the table where you were having lunch.
That's right, yes.
Could you tell us briefly about the conditions there?
The conditions, we were at a public restaurant, and it was between lunch and dinner, so it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were tearing down the restaurant and doing, I guess, what waitresses and waiters call side work, and they were clattering around right next to us with dishes and cups and knives and forks, and it was so loud.
And when you read that transcript, you may have put, did you place these bright pink?
I put bright, yes, because there were so many ridiculous things.
On my transcript, you went through and put all those bright pink stickies on there
Yeah.
because they were places where you didn't recall saying exactly what was written down. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, let me ask you very briefly about the incidents. You used the word a couple times, snapshot. Do you recall
Yeah.
that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you have a recollection of these events in those terms?
Yes, it is. It's kind of like, it's like, I can't explain it any other way than to say that time takes on a different texture. And it's like, it's like a video, but it's brightly colored. I remember certain things exactly, that could, like they're right in front of my face now.
When the defendant, Phil Spector, placed a gun at your head in both these incidents?
Yes,
Would you characterize those as you have a snapshot memory of those events?
exactly.
Maybe not who was there that evening or what time you arrived, but when that incident happened to you.
That's exactly what I remember, yes.
And I think you told Mr. Rosen that at the time of the second incident, you weren't scared right at that moment. You were putting up this British kind of defense.
Right,
Self-protection, maybe?
that's correct.
But later, were you scared as you thought back on this?
Oh, yes. Afterwards, it was like, oh, my God. You know, I even now, I get flip-flop in my stomach when I think of it. But at the time, it was like this self-preservation, you know, like don't panic and just handle it. Like, I guess a fireman wouldn't go into the fire and save people if he thought about getting burned, you know. That wasn't what I was thinking at the time. I wasn't frightened at the time.
You were thinking of how to get out of that house?
Yeah,
alive.
absolutely.
Thank you, nothing further.
Thank you. Recross?
You didn't refuse any of the $9,009 that was paid to you for your interviews, did you?
Absolutely not.
Beyond the scope, I never asked it.
In any event, she's answered no.
Now, when you say they were tearing down the restaurant, you don't mean they were completing demolition with a ball and chain. What you mean is they were breaking down for lunch and setting up for dinner.
Exactly.
Okay. And Mr. Dixon asked you about a snapshot?
Yes.
You have a snapshot? This snapshot, it's clear in spite of the fact that you told both District Attorney investigators Freya and Devine that you were very vague, it was very foggy,
sorry, I
and you
missed-
were really reaching to give them what they want. Is that correct?
I didn't hear the first part of your question, so I don't understand
Sure, let me
the
rephrase.
context.
You told Mr. Dixon just a moment ago you had a clear snapshot.
Yes.
What I'm asking is this. You have this clear snapshot in spite of the fact before you came into court here, you told both District Attorney investigators, Freya and Devine, that it was very vague, things were very foggy, and you were really reaching to give them what they wanted, correct?
See, I think that's out of context, sir. I don't believe I was referring to the gun and it pointing at my head. That is absolutely clear.
Where are the stickies? You have those?
I don't have them.
Mr. Dixon has such a way of doing this. Such a way of doing this.
Sure. Sample full discovery.
You said I could knock myself out. I'm sorry, I obviously haven't seen this before. I just need a moment, okay? Did you write on these stickies?
I don't recall.
Well, let me take him up to you. Mr. Dixon knows I can't do anything because I've got his eyes on me. Let's, here, may I step up? I don't mean to intrude on your space.
As long as you don't bite me.
Wouldn't think of it. Not in front of all these people. Okay. Here's the stickies. There's a few that are written on. Is that your
That's
handwriting?
not my handwriting.
Is that your handwriting?
That's not my handwriting.
And is this your handwriting? Oops.
Sorry, that's not my handwriting.
And there's just one more. Is that your handwriting?
No.
Okay. And there's what, I don't know,
So apparently I did.
10, 12, Mr. Dixon, 10, 12, 15 stickies, something like that?
I
Okay.
got bored with it after a while because there were so many.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Nothing further.
Redirect.
No, thank you, Your Honor, nothing further.
All right, subject to recall, you're excused. Thank you for being here. You may step down.
Dr. John Andrews, Your Honor.
All right. What I'd like to do is, I hope everyone's aware, one of the jurors has to leave at about 3:15, 3:20. I'd like
Yes, Your
to
Honor.
work straight through, and
That's
then we'll
fine.
see how we're doing.
I was
Okay.
anticipating that.
All right. Does anybody want to stretch? Take 5 minutes before, just get up and stretch for a few minutes?
Sorry about that, guys. I had to go run off the yard monsters so Spike could go potty.
Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
John, John, Andrews, Andrews.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Andrews, I'd like you to tell the jurors, please, what you do for a living, sir.
I'm a deputy medical examiner and neuropathology consultant to the Department of Coroner County of Los Angeles.
What was awkward? What did I miss? Yeah, I don't think she took him seriously either because, well, I mean, she said she got all British. So, culture-wise, maybe, I guess culture-wise it's hard for me to judge, but the fact that she was like, stop that, put that down, like, that doesn't sound like fear to me. That sounds like she didn't take him seriously. Because if someone points a gun at me, I'm not going to say, oh, stop, put that down. I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to do what they tell me to do. And yeah, Nancy, absolutely. Yeah. And then she actually left the country, came back, and then called him wanting another job. That's no. Absolutely not. Oh, I missed it. I was outside with Spike. Yeah. He thinks he's funny and he's not. He's cringy and patronizing. I don't like him at all. Not at all. Okay, so deputy medical examiner. I could not get the word medical out a while ago.
Yes, sir.
What is a neuropathologist as opposed to a forensic pathologist?
Forensic pathologist usually refers to the deputy medical examiner that covers basically all the fields in the depth required in order to pass examinations as a forensic pathologist that's given by the American Board of Pathology. And we'll do general autopsies and document those findings, try to determine cause and manner of death, and document them in such a way that, if necessary, that he can testify in court or she can testify in court as to those findings.
You told me before we started that you had a little bit of a cold you were trying to kick, and I told you maybe you need to see a doctor.
Yes, sir.
The joke went over with you about like it did with the jurors. Do me a favor, because your voice is a little bit soft, pull that microphone a little closer to you. If anybody has any trouble hearing, then they'll let us know.
And I apologize in advance. The cough has not let up yet, and I'll do my best to suppress it.
That's quite all right, quite all right. With regard to neuropathology, what is the difference, or what is the study of neuropathology as opposed to the study of pathology, which you've just described in brief to the jurors?
Well, you, in addition to the standard training for pathology, such as anatomic pathology, where you cover all the organ systems, you take additional special training to go into much more depth with regard to the central nervous system, peripheral nerves, and muscles, depending on the program. But basically, you're focusing on diseases or trauma that affects the central nervous system and its connections.
Yeah, and the majority of Hollywood is crazy. So, from what I understand. Yes, I agree with Judy. You are correct. Yes, Hollywood or not. Yes, he's Hollywood or not, he's crazy. Yeah, he walks around his house in the dark in a Batman outfit. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, the man is crazy. Absolutely, this man is insane.
Of course, the central nervous system, kind of the centerpiece of that would be the spinal cord and its connection to the brain, and then it's branching down into the body to different areas and organs of the body, correct?
Yes, sir. Primarily, central nervous system would be brain and spinal cord.
Doctor, could you explain for the jurors what education, training, and background qualifies you to perform your consulting duties as a forensic neuropathologist with the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office?
Yes, sir. I graduated from medical school in 1960. At the time I graduated, it was called the College of Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons here in Los Angeles. But shortly after that, there was a merger between the MD and DO professions, such that after that merger, we were given the option to have the MD degree. 90+% of the DOs elected to take that option, and we were no longer allowed to use the DO degree. So since then, I've been an MD. That school subsequently is now called the UC Irvine School of Medicine. Then after that, I had a year internship at the LA County Hospital. Subsequent to that, I had a year of graduate work getting an MS degree in anatomy at UCLA School of Medicine. Following that, I had a year of internal medicine residency at Harbor General Hospital in Torrance, California, and then 3 years of clinical neurology residency at UCLA School of Medicine. Subsequent to that, I was awarded a 2-year special NIH fellowship for research. The first year was in electron microscopy and neuropathology at UCLA. The second year was at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and again in electron microscopy, neuropathology, and as a matter of fact, Dr. Liesma and I were there at the same time in the same program and had a very good year together there. Following that, I was asked to return to UCLA on the full-time faculty and had a joint appointment in neurology and pathology, first as an assistant professor and subsequently as an associate professor with tenure. So I stayed there the next several years and did the usual administration, teaching, research, and so on, and was head of the neuropathology laboratory at the Reed Neurological Research Institute during that time. Was your title the chief of neuropathology, Lana? I can't remember whether it was chief or head, but something like that.
And that was of the neuropathology, specifically the neuropathology lab at UCLA at the Reed Medical Center? At
the Reed Neurological Research Center. The separate pathology department had its own neuropathology section as well.
I see. Go ahead.
After that, I elected to go into private practice in Santa Monica and also taught part-time on a voluntary basis at UCLA during those years, and was there about 3 years, and then joined 2 friends of mine that had been through the neurosurgery program at UCLA and had since moved to Provo, Utah, and joined them in private practice. And basically that private practice, both in Santa Monica and in Utah, consisted of clinical neurology, sleep disorders medicine, electroencephalography or brainwave tests, and electromyography or muscle testing and nerve testing. and seeing patients, admitting them to the hospital, taking care of them, discharging them either back to the referring physician or sometimes continuing at the referring physician's request to continue their care. In Utah, that changed a little bit because as a combined neurology neurosurgery practice, there were 2 neurosurgeons and myself for the first few years. It was necessary to cover each other with regard to patient care, so all of us could get sleep because we were the main trauma center for all of southern Utah and parts of western Wyoming, and had an enormous busy practice with a lot of trauma that the neurosurgeons attracted. And so much more than the usual clinical neurologist, I saw a great deal of trauma, head, spine, and so on during that time, and took care of those patients. And the neurosurgeons would be called in by me as I was doing the acute care, only if they needed surgery immediately that night within minutes or an hour. So otherwise, I continued the care throughout the night, and the neurosurgeon took over the care the next day. So it was a bit atypical for the usual neurology practice. During that time in Utah, I also was group surgeon for the 19th Special Forces Group for a 6-year period. The first as a major, then as a lieutenant colonel, received an honorable discharge. Also, during that time, I took a part-time residency in anatomic pathology at the University of Utah Department of Pathology, and during that time obtained the qualifications so that I could take the anatomic pathology board examination. When I completed that, I was asked to join the full-time faculty at the University of Utah, and spent the next 10 years there on the full-time faculty, first as an associate professor, then as a full professor, and again, the usual administration, teaching, not as much research. It was just a very busy surgical pathology practice. I think I generated about 20,000 reports during that time, biopsies from all over the body, and also was doing neuropathology consultation work for University of Utah physicians that referred cases. Then, after that, I returned to Los Angeles and spent 1 year in forensic pathology fellowship at the Department of Coroner in Los Angeles. I should also mention that I was a deputy medical examiner and neuropathology consultant for the Office of the Medical Examiner in the state of Utah during the time I was in Utah, the last 6 years or so. And also was on the governor's medical examiner advisory committee during that time. That was part of the Department of Health. Okay. But returning to Los Angeles, had my year of fellowship, then was asked to join the full-time staff, and that's been my position since then.
With regard to the private practice that you engaged in both in Santa Monica and in Utah, did that allow you to see an inordinate amount or a vast number of trauma cases dealing with the head, neck, spine, that someone that was just in forensic pathology might not have the advantage of seeing and working on and researching and documenting?
Yes, sir. We were the main trauma center, a tertiary trauma center for the whole southern part of Utah.
With regard to board certifications, doctor, do you hold any board certifications in medicine?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain what those board certifications are, please?
I've been board certified and still am in clinical neurology and in neuropathology, sleep disorders medicine, anatomic pathology, and forensic pathology.
Do you hold any state licenses in states other than California? I'm assuming you are a California licensed
Yes, sir.
physician.
Wyoming and Utah.
With regard to autopsies, we have heard testimony in the case. Some of us think we're becoming somewhat expert in autopsies and neuropathology and things of that nature that we've never said before this trial. There is an actual neuropathology report that's included in the protocol here in Los Angeles County in some cases, correct?
Yes, my role for the last several years after...
Excuse me, yes, I think yes answered it, so next question, please.
In fact, is your role as a forensic neuropathologist in consultation with the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office to document after you examine certain areas of the body and document your findings, specifically focused on neuropathology and those findings therefrom.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain what that role is?
Yes, sir. For about the last 5 years, I don't do general autopsies anymore at Dr. Lakshmanan's request because the other deputy medical examiners on the staff are doing the general autopsies, and they will, depending on the type of case, when they feel that there's a special need for neuropathology consultation, will refer that case to me or to one of the other neuropathologists on the staff. And then we do the examination of the material that they send. It may consist of brain and coverings, spinal cord, with or without coverings, at times even some peripheral nerve or muscle in a few occasions.
And you have a specialized training being a neuropathologist as opposed to just a general pathologist. You have very specialized training, highly focused on the nerve systems in the body, the spinal cord, brain function, and the way that the body reacts with all those systems, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. With regard to publications, have you ever published in the area of neuropathology?
Yes, sir.
Approximately how many times?
Articles only or books and articles?
Let's just start with articles.
Probably in the neighborhood of 35 to 40 articles that deal primarily or exclusively with neuropathology.
Are these articles published in recognized medical journals?
Yes, sir.
Are these articles peer-reviewed as a custom and practice?
Yes, sir.
Have you also published, or have you also been invited as a speaker on subject matters concerning neuropathology?
Yes, sir.
Approximately how many times?
I have never kept track, but I'm guessing it would be someplace around 30 to 50 times, maybe 100 times. I have not kept track, but it's been many.
But it's not uncommon
No, sir.
for you to be asked to speak to other neuropathologists and pathologists in this field of neuropathology.
Or general physicians.
Okay. Concerning books, let's talk about that for a second. Have you ever been asked to either include a chapter or write a chapter in a medical textbook of any kind or edit textbooks?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain that for us, please?
I've contributed chapters to 5 different books, and 2 of those books I was also a co-editor.
Have you ever authored any books yourself?
As a co-author, yes, sir.
How many books?
2.
Could you explain those books for us, please?
The first was entitled Neurocytopathology, and I worked on that one with Dr. Barry Schumann, who was head of the cytology laboratory at the University of Utah. And we published that back in early 1990s.
Is there a second book?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell us what that is, please?
That one is entitled Forensic Neuropathology, a practical review of the fundamentals, and I just received my author's copy last night when I got home.
I'm holding a very heavy forensic neuropathology book that nobody in the room, except for you, could ever deign to understand. This is brand new off the presses, correct?
Yes, sir.
Who did you author this book with?
Dr. Itabashi and Dr. Tamayasu, who during the course of development of this book passed away, but she's been kept on as an author, and Dr. Ehrlich and Dr. Lakshmanan.
How do you expect that book to be utilized in the field of neuropathology?
It's designed primarily to fill gaps that are difficult to find in the current neuropathology book literature that's available to deputy medical examiners and other physicians, and also to provide guidelines to deputy medical examiners as to how to collect specimens, which type of cases to refer to the neuropathologist, potential pitfalls in acquiring specimens and providing us with information. And also to help bridge the gap if, for example, someone like me that was primarily doing academic neuropathology and decides to make the change to forensic neuropathology, what in addition to the usual hospital practice might one need to know when we try to provide some guidelines for that.
Is this book expected to be utilized in hospitals and medical examiners' offices nationwide?
Well, we hope so.
Is this book also expected to be published in foreign countries as well?
Yes, it'll be published in English, but both Dr. Lakshmanan and Dr. Noguchi, who wrote the foreword, have so many contacts in foreign countries, I'm sure they'll at least make them aware of the availability of the book.
Are you also a consultant? You've already explained that you consult at the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. Do you also consult at any other coroner's offices?
Yes, sir. I'm a forensic neuropathology consultant at Orange County Medical Examiner's Office, which is part of the Sheriff Coroner Department.
How long have you held that position?
Since approximately 2001 or early 2002.
Dr. Andrews, I want to focus your attention, and we've heard a lot of science in this case. Lots of talk from lots of doctors. I want to focus your attention very, very specifically on 3 or 4 areas. The first area that I want to ask you about is what I would call reflex movements. And I want to ask you very specifically, are you aware, first of all, foundationally, of the injury suffered by Lana Clarkson as a result of the gunshot wound?
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, were you the neuropathologist who wrote the neuropathology report on her autopsy?
Yes.
In other words, you've actually examined physically, you've looked at her spinal cord, the spinal column, the trauma, and the injury that cord and column received as a result of the gunshot wound.
Yes.
You also examined her brain.
Yes.
Would an injury such as the one suffered by Lana Clarkson result in any reflex movements, as you understand reflex movements, after she suffered the gunshot wound that you examined?
I can't answer that yes or no. I'd have to qualify my answer.
Explain your answer for me, please.
All right. That type of injury is a classical example of the type of injury that is going to produce a condition called spinal shock.
That's the first time we've heard that in this courtroom, the phrase spinal shock. Can you explain for the jurors what it is when you say spinal shock? What is that phenomenon?
Jeff, I don't think that was the complete answer. I'm not sure if it was or not. But he said he had to explain his answer, and he just said he had to qualify.
I believe he's now in the process of explaining his answer. I think it's all contained within, even if it was broken into, I believe he's now, are you going to now explain what you had asked to explain?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, the objection is overruled. All right.
Go ahead, doctor.
I need to preface my explanation by indicating that shock to most people watching TV programs and so on, or experiences with family members that might have been in the hospital and had, quote, shock, usually refers to what's called circulatory shock in the medical profession. Basically, an oversimplification but sufficient explanation is that there's failure either of the heart as a pump, or there's a loss of blood, so there's not sufficient blood circulating, so blood pressure drops and that the organs do not get enough blood and so on. That's what most people think of when we talk about shock. Spinal shock is a completely different phenomenon, and it refers only to something that occurs in the nervous system. And what happens is when a portion of the spinal cord is disconnected or isolated from higher centers, it undergoes what's referred to as spinal shock, which basically means that it's not carrying out reflexes such as cutaneous reflexes, deep tendon reflexes. All voluntary movement and sensation below that level is lost if there is a complete anatomic or physiologic transection of that cord. And if necessary, I can go into that more. But basically what happens is the cord portion that's isolated from the rest of the brainstem and brain undergoes this sudden lack of ability to function, and the muscles are flaccid and lose their tone. Flaccid to us means limp. So there's a variety of things that occur immediately if you have a situation where you have a human that has a complete anatomic or physiologic transection, and it occurs abruptly. And so we've got a severe injury. In that setting, you are going to see spinal shock. And it's most dramatic when it's in an individual that is high in the spinal cord, as it was in Ms. Clarkson. It's abrupt in onset, which again it was here with a bullet wound. and it's severe. There was a complete transection that I saw at the time of autopsy. It's not even necessary, however, to have a complete anatomic transection. All you need is sufficient damage to the cord so that any remaining fibers that might still be there cannot carry any impulses or messages. So you can get incomplete injury, and that's one of the reasons that neurologists and neurosurgeons are taught, if you have an acute trauma case that comes in and you've got no reflexes, you've got no voluntary movement, the last thing you want to do is go out and tell the family the person is going to be paralyzed for life, because it might be one of those cases where the trauma is severe, but it's not completely anatomically tearing those fibers apart. So some of them that are still intact, even though their function is disturbed and they can't, for a period of time, conduct any impulses, they may recover over time as the swelling goes away, the bleeding goes away, so you can get some return of function. So you always wait until you see what their recoverability will be before you start predicting what the long-term outcome will be.
You've used some phraseology that I want you to explain in a little bit more detail in just a second. First of all, let's start with the basics. My spinal cord runs from the base of my neck where it connects to the brain all the way down to the center of my back, correct?
Now down into your lower back, yes.
All the way down to the lower vertebrae.
And it usually ends at about L2 level.
And that would...
There's some variability in that.
L2 is lumbar 2?
Yes, sir.
And that's down close to where my belt line is, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that is the spinal cord kept, and the reason I'm asking these questions, we'll get to transection in just a second. That's one of the 3 or 4 points I want to ask you about. But for foundational purposes, is the spinal cord contained in a closed capsule, if you will, a closed environment?
Together with the brain, yes.
Okay. Describe that, without getting too graphic, describe that for us, please. When you say closed environment, is there a membrane that surrounds it? What is it?
Yes, you have the brain and spinal cord, and around that you have some very delicate membranes called the pia arachnoid. And then you've got spinal fluid, and then you've got the dura, which is the more firm, very, very tough membranous material. And then you've got the skeletal system, and there's additions in there. There's epidural fat, there's vessels in there, and so on. But just basically, it's surrounded by a bony protective compartment, both in the head and in the spinal column. And so it's a closed compartment.
All right. You said that if there is a transection of the spine high, and you used the word high a couple of times, there are certain phenomena that you expect. All right.
Yes.
Is there a difference, literally, if my spine were severed, lower back, mid-back, versus just at the base of my neck or the base of my skull? Is there a difference in how that transection is going to affect the rest of my body?
Yes.
Why is that? Why is the location important with your determination as to whether or not spinal shock or reflex movement was available to Lana Clarkson after the gunshot?
Well, because the different levels of the spinal cord serve different parts of the body.
Okay. First of all, let me ask you this, and then I'll ask you to go ahead and explain that answer. Where was her spine severed?
It was severed at the junction between the first cervical segment and the medulla.
So between C1 and the medulla?
Yes, sir.
That's literally at the base of the brain, beginning of the spinal cord, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you get any higher a transection than Lana Clarkson suffered?
Yes, you can get, there's various types of injury to the brainstem itself.
On
and
the
then-
spinal cord itself?
No.
So
Spinal cord starts at first cervical segment.
That's my question. In other words, with regard to the spinal cord's injury that Lana Clarkson suffered, it doesn't get any higher than, and literally we're talking about from top to bottom, it doesn't get any higher than that which she suffered, correct?
That's correct.
All right. As a result of that extremely high transection of the spinal cord, you said that it could either be anatomic or physiologic transection, correct?
Yes.
The jurors don't know what that means. Describe the difference between those two phrases, please.
Anatomic transection means that when you look at it just with your eye, you can see that it is completely disconnected. All the connections, all of the nerves have been completely severed so that there's two separate fragments. physiologic transection, I briefly alluded to without specifying it as such, and that is where maybe there's not a complete anatomic transection, maybe only half or 3/4 of the spinal cord has been anatomically disrupted so that those fibers are completely cut. But there might be some fibers still passing down from the upper to the lower part of the spinal cord, and those can be so damaged with regard to the sudden change in blood supply, with regard to the nature of the trauma, a variety of factors, and those might not be able to conduct any impulses even though they're anatomically still connected. So this is a living thing. It's not like a telephone wire. Telephone wire, if you just electrically stimulate one part, then it should travel down the wire unless it's completely severed. Axons, the nerve processes don't act that way. They can be anatomically present, but so disturbed in their function because of the temperature too high, temperature too low, blood supply isn't quite right, the chemical environment changes because of the trauma nearby, so they can't conduct even if they're anatomically intact.
Axons, you used another phrase that I'm not sure I understand. Axons would be the nerve fibers that make up, in combination as they're going down the spinal cord, they make up the spinal cord, correct?
Well, the nerve processes include both dendrites that receive impulses and axons that take the impulse away from the cell body to take it to the next neuron in line or the end organ.
The point you're making, doctor, in layman's terms, is that if in fact a spinal cord is transected, but there might be some fibers left, notwithstanding the fact that most of it is transected, there might be some fibers left. Those fibers will suffer such trauma that even if they're intact, they will not send neural impulses to the body, correct?
For a period of time, and again, depending on the exact nature of the trauma.
All right, and this is the phenomenon that you're referring to as spinal shock, correct?
Yes, sir.
In your expert opinion, doctor, is the injury suffered by Lana Clarkson, whether the spinal cord was completely transected or partially transected, what you call physiologically transected, would she have suffered spinal shock immediately after that gunshot went through her spinal cord?
Yes, sir.
And what, in fact, would the result of that spinal shock be on her musculature? And I'm specifically asking about the diaphragms, the esophagus, her breathing mechanisms, her movement mechanisms. What effect would that spinal shock have had on her?
There would be immediate cessation of those types of movements.
All right. Could she stretch out and posture?
No.
Could she wiggle her toes?
No.
Could she scream?
No.
Could her diaphragms... Do me a favor, doctor. Explain for me how breath gets into my lungs.
Well, we're going to take that up first thing tomorrow.
All right.
Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition, 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
This is interesting.
Real quick, we've got a couple of issues, but Dr. Andrews' CV is like one page, just a little summary that we get from the coroner's office. It really only has 2 publications. And Mr. O'Kemp indicated he's going to list somewhere where he's just got it listed. And we'd like to get that because he doesn't have a real formal type CV given his position. And I want to make sure we get that before morning or as soon as possible. And then I think Penny is going to be working on this issue, and she has an issue regarding his publication, his book that was brought up. Okay, Roger's going to handle it.
Yes. The court has seen the book. And was testified to. He just received it yesterday, author's copy only, so it's not like we have any place to go. We'd like to get it this evening so that we can prepare for cross tomorrow so there will be no delay. However, we recognize it may be effective. Mr. Jackson may need to look at it also. So if something can be worked out, that would be great, but if not, at the very least, we'd at least like to get a copy now of the chapter in question. But our preference is to get the book if we can use it, or if we can work it out.
I can't get him the book. I'm not having him testify to the book. I'm not going to refer to the book. His testimony is not coming out of the book. That's the author's copy, and I told the doctor if I showed the copy in court, I promised him that it would not be marked as an exhibit. It wouldn't be taken away from him, and I intend to keep that promise. there is no chapter about which he's going to be testifying. He's testifying 4 things. They know exactly what the 4 things are: decerebrate rigidity, focal blood in the alveoli, reflex movements, and the heaviness of the lungs. That's it. And none of that is, I haven't read the book because the book just got on the shelves 10 minutes ago. I mean, I don't know anything about it, so.
Maybe I can help here.
All right.
There is actually a chapter entitled Injuries Due to Firearms and Other Missile Launching Devices. Seems to me pretty relevant in light of the testimony already. We haven't even gotten to the rest of it.
Okay, well, since they've got to be allowed to look at it. If you're going to use it tonight, then sit down when we're done here and work on it. If you're not, they have to have a chance to review it before tomorrow.
Well,
And also, we will not mark it as an exhibit, so that we'll keep our promise.
the only thing I can do is have him come in tomorrow morning and look at it early because the doctor just walked out with it.
Well, you might try to get him before he goes. I understand that, and I'm just saying, I don't care if you all sit in a room together and read it together. I'm sure it'll be fascinating. And yes, but they have a right to take a look at it and have both Mr. Plord and Ms. Kenny Bodden take a look at it and see if there's...
If we have a photostat of the chapter, that would solve everything.
I was just going
Work it out among yourselves. It's probably copyrighted. I'm not sure that I have a right to order it photostated, but I have a right to let you look
well,
at
if
it.
we prepare...
Can you work it out with the DA?
Sure.
That's what I'm saying. Fine. You have a right to look at it. You have a right to review it. Work it out with them. Okay, what else?
You might want to go grab him and see if he's fit for the job.
And you'll provide the list to his other more complete CV before Mr. Ocampo has?
I guess Mr. Ocampo has been in conversation with Mr. Plord. I don't know anything about it. I stay out of their conversations.
Okay.
We're just curious if you had a chance to look at those records.
I have.
The emails.
Yes. I'm ready.
So are we. Okay. The records that were submitted by...
The records I have here, I will turn them over.
Well, they're really...
I know, you have a right to look at them privately, and I will turn them over to you. There's nothing that is privileged. There is a cover letter I will give you, as well as the package it came in.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay? Now, do you want rulings on the emails?
Please.
Okay. Whose phone is that? Okay, all right, it's part of Court TV. You get a pass on this one. Okay, the first things that were in the folder were things that you've already given to me. These are the pages from her address book that has the name of the doctor and whatnot, and also one of the people that testified. One of the people that testified in this matter, Mr. Potera or whatever. Well, fine, those are, you'll do what you want with those. As far as the emails, now, have you been able, I know that some of these have the problems with the dates. They appear, I'm not here, okay? It appears that these are from January of 2003, from the content. Is everybody in agreement or not in agreement over that? There's some of them January, some of them are from the prior year. Can you date these into 2003, 2002?
Kind of in that. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. It's close enough. You have to do it by content because you got the 1904 on it.
I understand the 1904, which is the problem, but I'm saying if it's from 1999, then there's a whole different problem.
No. It's not. If you look at the content in the context of the testimonies, it is, like the court said, the 2003 area.
Here's my general holding, and there's some things specifically we need to talk about. If it deals with financial problems, if it deals with depression, certainly those are usable, and there are some of these clearly deal with that. There is a lot talking about her drinking of tequila, and where are you going with that?
Judge, I think the one that's important for us is the one where she indicates that she's hurt herself having tequila. I don't think the other ones, if Your Honor thinks that they're not that important, it's not that. But we just wanted to give Your Honor a context to show that that email just didn't come out of the blue, that there was a history of tequila. But I think the one that we're really focusing on is the first one Your Honor has about the hurting herself when she's drinking tequila.
Yeah, it indicates that she suffered injuries while she was under the influence of tequila, and obviously
we just gave Your Honor the
dovetails into the defense theory.
We gave Your Honor the other ones to show you that there were other emails where he talks about drinking tequila, so it shows it's not out of the blue. just for the
you
purposes
wish
of
to be heard?
admissibility.
With regard to the tequila emails, I mean, the court has already talked about the financial interests and depression, et cetera. The tequila has absolutely no bearing on anything. I mean, 1101B still applies to both sides. It's not just applicable to defendants. That she's talked about in an email having consumed tequila and injured herself, that's completely, I mean, unless there's some context to that she intended to injure herself, and she goes through a systematic process of drinking tequila and trying to hurt herself that would absolutely have nothing to do with this case.
Well, you have to remember there's now two theories from the defense. There's the theory that this is a suicide. There's also the theory put forth by both, I believe, Dr. Spitz and Dr. Bodden, that this was either an impulsive act or has something caused by drinking and pills. Even if it's not deliberate, that an accident can happen when you're drinking.
I realize that. If this was a slip and fall case, that would be different. The gun was in her mouth. Guns don't get in people's mouths accidentally. I don't care how you slip and fall, you're not going to fall and bite a gun.
I understand that.
I just don't, I guess I don't see the relevance. I think they're stretching, I think they're grasping at straws, and I think they're trying to do everything they can to besmirch the memory of Lana Clarkson, even if subtly. And this tequila reference is exactly that. I mean, this case, remember, the case started with her stealing tequila from the House of Blues, and that went the way of the dodo. So this kind of ongoing defense evolving theory of what she did and didn't do is really a stretch. And this stretches all the way back, I think Ms. Kinney-Bodden's reference to the one email that can be dated, or the one or two that can be dated, all the way back to 2001 or maybe 2002.
Well, this may or may not be referring, and there is obviously a dispute as to the accident with a broken wrist. It may or may not have something to do with it. Even if it's a stretch, it's a matter of whether it is permissible for them to argue if it falls within the realm of what has been admitted and testified to. Are they trying to besmirch her? Perhaps. Does it have some other relevance and some level of admissibility? Yes, I'm going to allow that in.
I guess I would leave the court with this thought.
Okay.
The prosecution has never argued that she wasn't under some influence of alcohol, and we've never argued that that alcohol wasn't tequila. The tequila bottle sitting on the coffee table. If that were the big fight, I could see, okay, well, Judge, we need to prove that it's tequila. The prosecution's disagreeing with that. We're not. We know that it's tequila. I guess I don't see.
I know. What my job is not what I believe or disbelieve. It's whether there's a basis for admissibility and then can be argued to the jury, and I find that it does exist in this case, so my duty is then to admit it or at least allow them to use it as they see fit, assuming it doesn't violate the evidence code. There is are you asking me, you have highlighted certain things in yellow. Is this what I'm supposed to be looking at?
Yes, just because of the format, it's difficult to read, so we did that to make it easier.
Would you please tell me what the admissibility of the following statement is? Inga was waiting to meet you and was disappointed that you didn't make it. You should have seen the crazy lesbo chair dance we two did to the funk music, just like in a strip club, but with clothes on. Do you want to tell me what the basis of admissibility is?
That should be withdrawn.
Good. Okay.
Make it easy.
All right. Let's see. Okay, this is one I think you've indicated it deals with tequila, but it by itself, it really is nothing. I wanted to go to Cabo Wabo so bad and never got the chance. Now at least I can try their tequila. You're not seeking that, all right? The same as the shooting tequila after a rap party. Okay, that's out, all right. Okay, that takes care of those references. I think all the remaining ones, if you follow the rules that I gave you, I think they all deal, the ones that have some reference to depression, lack of money, desperation, etc. And realizing, etc. I don't mean to be that vague, but keep it within the parameters that I've set forth. Does anybody else wish to be heard?
No.
Okay, that's it.
Can I collect those back because
Yes.
I gave you my copy?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge.
All right.
This court is now in session. The Honorable Larry Paul Fidler, Judge presiding.
All right, the defendant is present with his counsel. The district attorneys are present. The jurors and alternates are not. Yes.
I didn't even.
Okay. Morning.
Yeah, Your Honor, with reference to the discovery we asked for yesterday, we just got it moments ago. We're still waiting for some additional. We may not be able to finish our cross with Dr. Till after lunch.
Okay.
But what we've done is to kind of work through it, and because we just got the book, Ms. Kenny is looking it over now. We tried to make arrangements to get it last night. That couldn't be done. Then we got here at 8:30. Wasn't here. Anyway, without getting into all that, we just got it a few minutes ago. We're still waiting for his list of articles. So
I have it.
we've got other witnesses just in case we don't. We need to fill time. We're going to bring some witnesses in early and then try to finish up after lunch with the doctor if we don't get to them. So I'm going to look for it now.
All right. Can you bring the jurors in?
Yes, we're right here.
Thank you. All right. All right. The jurors and alternates are now present. The witness previously sworn and still under oath is on the stand, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, yesterday when we left off for the afternoon, you were about to describe what muscles are involved in breathing, just as a foundational matter.
Well, there are many, but the main ones would be the diaphragm, intercostal muscles, abdominal muscles, and there are some accessory muscles of respiration which aren't nearly as critical as those three groups.
Are those part of the muscle group, or are those muscles included in the skeletal muscles or the cutaneous muscles when you say that they would have experienced the spinal shock in Ms. Clarkson based on the injury that you saw of her spine?
Yes.
There would have been no movement, no spontaneous reflex movement of the diaphragms?
No.
No spontaneous reflex movement of the intercostal muscles?
No.
No spontaneous reflex movements of the abdominal muscles?
No.
And those are all the muscles that are, with the addition of several others, we're not going to do an anatomy class, but with the addition of several others, those muscles are largely involved in literally the process of what I just did, breathing in and out.
Yes.
Is this all a result, what you're describing to the jurors, this lack of spontaneous reflex movements, is this all a result of what you described yesterday as spinal shock?
It is largely the result of that, but there's also well-described literature with regard to additional injuries which Ms. Clarkson suffered, and that had to do with the intracranial injuries. And it's well known that with those types of injuries, you can also get what's called post-traumatic apnea. So even if the spinal shock had not been there, there is a high probability that apnea or lack of breathing would have occurred simply as a result of the intracranial injuries.
The intracranial injuries were a result literally of that single bullet transecting her spine, slamming into the back of her skull, correct?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, is there published medical literature that agrees with your conclusions and opinions concerning the spinal shock that Ms. Clarkson would have suffered or experienced as a result of that gunshot wound?
Yes, sir. You do not have to take my word for it. I just, as a curiosity a few days ago when it seemed possible that I might be testifying in this case after a discussion with you, I put the word spinal shock in the PubMed, which is the National Library of Medicine website. And just with those two words, I got 1,400 hits. Now, admittedly, not every one of those is going to be directly applicable to this case, but the point is it's a well-known, well-described phenomenon.
Doctor, there was made, well, let me ask you this. Yesterday you mentioned a couple of different anatomy parts, if you will, and I'm going to try to suffer my way through this and expect you to correct me when I get things wrong. You indicated that there would be no spontaneous cutaneous reflex, correct?
Yes, I think that it's important, though, With almost every medical rule, there are some exceptions, and what I stated was a generalization, and I think that for sake of accuracy, that I need to point out that there are rare exceptions to this
That was my
in
next
the older literature.
Okay.
The more recent literature would certainly verify what I've said. I, at your request, provided you with some articles, but just as a brief summary, some literature from the 1800s talks about decapitated patients and states without any reference to time frames or anything like that, that a very profoundly depressed, immediately profoundly depressed knee jerk could be elicited. It didn't mention any other reflexes, and of course that would have nothing to do with breathing. There are other articles that talk about spinal shock and indicate with high cervical lesions, such as occurred with Ms. Clarkson, you can have, at least for a brief period, some cutaneous reflexes down in the sacrococcygeal area. An example would be if one scratches very close to the anus, there is sometimes a weak contraction of the anal sphincter. Again, it's controversial. The more recent literature indicates that for 20 to 60 minutes, all reflexes, cutaneous and deep tendon reflexes, are abolished.
Doctor, I'd like to take as an example, I'm going to choose your first example, the knee jerk, as opposed to the second example of these exceptions. When you talk about a slight, for obvious reasons, it took a while, didn't it? When you talk about a reflex, doctor, on a very serious note, when you talk about the rare, exceptional circumstance where one might suffer or experience a reflex movement, you're not talking about a spontaneous reflex movement, are you?
No, sir.
As a matter of fact, when we've all gone to the doctor when we were little kids and had a doctor take a little hammer and just below the kneecap hit the whatever that is right below the kneecap, and your leg goes out just like mine is going out. You're telling me that there is some literature from the 1800s that suggests after decapitation, some doctor literally went up and tapped that area, and there was a very depressed, very slight movement after decapitation with no time frame reference given. Is that
No,
what you're
it said it
describing?
lasted only a few minutes.
Okay, that's what you're describing.
Yes, sir.
All right,
But I
Go
would
ahead.
like to, if I may,
please.
the only comment that I saw to that was in a reference that I provided to you that was by, I believe, Atkinson and Atkinson. And the two references that they gave, even though they stated this is well known, was a German reference and some old English book back in the 1800s. And I've not had an opportunity to examine those myself, so I can't tell you whether they were actually striking the knee in the appropriate place that we now do, or whether they were striking a muscle, because it's well known that for hours after death, you can strike a muscle directly, mechanically injure it, and that muscle only will contract. And if they had struck, for example, the quadriceps that causes the knee to extend, there could have been a little contraction of that for a time afterward that could have caused this profoundly depressed reflex, as they indicated. So I can't tell you the details of that, simply that in the more recent literature, they say it's virtually abolished, and certainly anything that would be of any practical value from the standpoint of breathing, movement of the arms and legs, and so on, no. It's my opinion that would not have occurred.
In your opinion, based on what you've just described, obviously you've already indicated to the jurors that that has nothing to do with breathing. Let me ask you a different question, doctor. If in fact Lana Clarkson's legs, her ankles were under her knees or behind her knees in a seated position, is the reflex movement that you're describing, this very exceptional, very rare reference back to the 1800s, would that account for the movement of the legs out in front of her, like I just did?
Well, I can only interpret the term profoundly depressed to mean that it was very difficult to see it, and if anything, it was a trace reflex. I would very much doubt that if that's the term that was used to describe it, it could create that type of gross movement. I would be skeptical.
again, based on the modern literature that you're aware of and the modern studies that have been done, and the medical literature that you've provided me with and I've in turn provided the defense with, that literature suggests the opposite, that in fact there is no reflex movement whatsoever, correct?
Yes, sir, and the article that I used to verify my opinion on that or add additional weight to it was the one specifically by DeTuno and colleagues, and I think that is the most careful study that I'm aware of on this particular subject, and how long the reflexes, if they're completely absent, how long they're absent, and what the sequence of reflex return is. I've not seen any article that goes into that type of detail.
And just so we're clear, that as a final thought on this point, just so we're very clear, what you've described as this exception, this rare exception, has only been referenced when there is some input onto the body, correct?
Yes, not spontaneous.
Not spontaneous. Thank you. I want to ask you about chickens and frogs real quick. There's been some reference by two different physicians in this trial. One referenced a chicken with his head cut off, and one referenced a frog that is being dissected, or just before being dissected, gets very rigid. Are chickens and frogs the proper analogy? Are they applicable to the case that's before us?
I don't believe so, no.
Why is that, doctor?
Well, there are several reasons. I have, as you had asked me to watch the testimony of Dr. Liesma and Dr. Baden, I didn't see it all, but I saw most of those. And I recall Dr. Liesma mentioning about when he was in biology class and pithed frogs, where you put the needle in at the base of the skull. He and I were in the same era. I also did that several times in class. And basically, if you're dealing with a vertebrate that is that primitive with regard to nervous system in comparison to humans, the spinal shock effect is so fleeting and transient and so quickly recoverable that by the time you pit the frog, set the frog on the table, and start to do your experiments, the spinal shock has basically worn off and you can elicit those reflexes. It's quite a different situation. With regard to the chicken with its head cut off, and I can recall the first time I saw that. That was a visit to my grandfather's farm, and I have to admit it's one of the most amazing things I'd seen in my life. I thought I had the greatest grandpa in the world because he could kill a chicken and then make its body run around. So, the point being there that, again, it's a very primitive nervous system, and as you get into greater and greater complexity and ascend the complexity of the vertebrate scale, you find increasing severity of spinal shock. It's more obvious and it lasts longer. And by the time you reach baboons, chimpanzees, and humans, it is very, very obvious and is in the most severe state known in all vertebrates. So primitive vertebrates, minimal, fleeting. As you ascend the complexity and the brain is more and more developed and sending more and more impulses to the spinal cord, the spinal shock is dramatic.
If I understand you correctly, a chicken lower on the evolutionary scale, and I don't want any letters from chicken lovers, but they are in fact lower on the evolutionary scale, correct?
Yes.
Almost no spinal shock, correct?
Yes, very fleeting, and just about as soon as they hit the ground, they can start to move and get up and run around for a time until they bleed to death.
Okay. With regard to humans, chimpanzees, baboons, and then humans, very, very high. As a matter of fact, the humans being the highest on the evolutionary scale, very profound spinal shock, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that spinal shock means that when, in fact, the spinal cord suffers a traumatic injury as the one you've described Lana Clarkson having suffered, that's when the body undergoes this massive shock, if you will, the flaccidity of muscles, of the musculature, flaccid, no movement, no reflex movements. There's no way that a human being can stand up and run around like a chicken with its head cut off, correct?
That's correct. And again, you don't need to take my word for it. I've provided you with some references that verify those statements, sir. One, I believe, was Tater's chapter in the neurotrauma book by Narayan et al. And another was Goodman's chapter in Handbook of Clinical Neurology, in which he specifically addresses the issue of the very, very simple vertebrate brain and spinal cord situations, such as frog and chicken, compared with humans.
As a matter of fact, that last publication, the Handbook of Clinical Neurology, that reference appears on page 244, correct? You have that?
I'd have to check my notes. May I do so?
Certainly.
Yeah, Goodman was page 245, yes, sir.
I want to change gears and ask you about a phrase that we've heard in this trial called decerebrate rigidity. Do you know what that phrase means?
Yes, sir. I've witnessed it many times.
Have you also heard it called posturing?
It's one of the types of abnormal posturing that can occur with various types of brain injury.
In your expert opinion, doctor, would Lana Clarkson have experienced decerebrate rigidity or posturing based on or following the spinal cord injury that she suffered as a result of that gunshot wound?
No, sir.
Can you explain your reasoning, please?
Yes, sir. In fact, I've seen many, many patients with decerebrate posturing at some stage of their clinical course. And decerebrate posturing is due to injuries that occur at approximately the level of the junction of the midbrain with the upper one-third of the pons in the brainstem area. It has to be a lesion above that region, which I'm putting my hand about at the top of my ear. Lesions above that level, depending on their exact nature and the structures they involve, can produce decerebrate rigidity. However, in order for that decerebrate rigidity to be manifest, the abnormal balance of impulses from those damaged higher centers has to proceed down the rest of the brainstem through the lower pons, the medulla, and into the spinal cord, and affect the neurons in the spinal cord in order to make that imbalance manifest and create that abnormal posturing. And in Ms. Clarkson's case, the lesion at the lower level, where the spinal cord was completely separated from the medulla, would make that absolutely impossible.
Is there references in the medical research that supports that conclusion as well, doctor?
Oh, yes, those are abundant, and Dr. Liesma mentioned, I believe, when he was talking about either that or another topic, the Plum and Posner reference, and I can use the same one. It's very clearly specified in there, and actually on a page later, it talks about lesions at a lower level and indicates exactly what I've said. Basically, spinal shock would occur, the muscles are completely flaccid or translation limp. And that's stated on the very next page after the discussion of decerebrate posturing. I also provided you with another reference that was from probably one of the most widely used medical physiology books in the country. It's used many times as a textbook for medical students and nursing students. And it's on general physiology of the body. And that was the Guyton and Hall reference. And on page 707, they clearly indicate that for decerebrate rigidity to occur, those impulses must reach the spinal cord so that they can produce those kinds of posturings.
In your expert opinion, doctor, was the wound that Lana Clarkson suffered such that those kinds of impulses would not have reached the lower spinal cord?
I don't believe that would have been possible.
So if there was a suggestion that immediately upon her wound or after her wound, that she straightened out like the frog that was described in a posture known as decerebrate rigidity, would you agree with that conclusion?
I would say that would not be possible in Ms. Clarkson's case. There is no way for those messages to get down into the cord so that posturing could occur.
Doctor, I'd like to change gears one more time. During the course of your examination, let me change that and ask you this. During the course of this trial, at some point, did you become aware that there may become an issue about blood in Lana Clarkson's lungs?
Yes, as a result of watching the testimony of Drs. Liesma and Bowden, as you requested.
Did you take it upon yourself, without even me requesting, to take a look at the slides that were prepared in this particular case of the alveoli and the blood, the focal blood that appeared in some of the alveoli?
Yes, I pulled the lung slides just out of curiosity to see for myself what the people were talking about.
In your expert opinion, doctor, how did blood get in the alveoli and how did the lungs get so heavy if Ms. Clarkson was not breathing?
Well, I can think of at least three, actually four ways that could happen. The fourth I'm going to dispense with because it actually can be rolled into one of these three. It's just a peripheral mechanism. But there are at least three ways that I can think of and outline that could occur.
Could you describe those for us, please?
Well, the first would be from what I understand about her posture after the gunshot wound, being upright in a chair for many hours, and then considering that the blood, at least in part, was diluted with watery spinal fluid, and the gravity would have taken that blood from the gunshot wound down through the oral cavity and into lungs and very possibly into stomach.
Yes. 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 I was right. I was right. I was right. Yes. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, but I gotta celebrate just a little bit because I thought I was going crazy. I really did, because Bodden got up there and he's like, her lungs were heavy because she had to have breathed the blood in to get it into her lungs. Do you guys remember? I don't know when it was. I'm not muted. Okay, good. I'm gonna be like, if I'm muted and I'm like, yay, that's gonna be weird. They're gonna be like, what in the heck is she doing? Because do you remember when the day Judy said, why wasn't there a lot of blood everywhere? I don't understand. And I was gonna say, I didn't want to get too graphic because, YouTube doesn't like it when you get too graphic. But she's sitting upright in a chair. She's been shot in the face. Gravity. This is an opening. Blood is going to drip in because it's an opening. Gravity is going to make the blood go in the lungs. Doesn't need to be breathed in. It's gravity. It's an opening. And I didn't dispute Dr. Bodden because he's a doctor, for crying out loud. I'm a nurse who hasn't practiced in 15 years. So I was like, okay, I could be wrong. So I didn't say anything when Dr. Bodden, but when Judy asked, before Bodden's testimony, when Judy asked where'd all the blood go, I was like, well, just imagine, because I didn't want to say it. Like, I just said it. That's why I threw up my banner. But I didn't want to say it when Judy asked, but I was like, but just think about her positioning and gravity and, where the blood would go. That's why it wasn't as much blood ever. I mean, there was blood from the spatter of the gunshot, but because it dripped in, because it's gravity and an opening, So I feel vindicated. I feel validated. But, I don't have as much education as a doctor, so I thought, well, maybe I got it wrong. I thought maybe to actually get blood in the alveoli, you do have to breathe it in. Because, like I said, I don't have a medical degree. I'm just a nurse. But, so, it makes me feel good when I get things right. So, that's my mini celebration. That put me out of a little funk I was in. So, sorry, guys.
Certainly that could be one mechanism, just simply that drainage because of the gravity position. Then we've also got the issues that others have commented on with regard to after the body was moved, it was put in a transport to take to the coroner's office, and then undressed and then photographed and so on and so forth, subsequently washed prior to the autopsy. At autopsy, Again, there's some movement. The lungs are removed, sections are taken of the lungs, and so on. So there's a lot of manipulation of the body afterward. And I don't need to, even though I would say there seems to be no doubt in my mind that it makes common sense that blood would reach the alveoli simply because of those mechanisms. You don't, again, need to take my word for it. It's been established in the medical literature.
Could you describe that, before we get to the other two, could you describe that medical literature that supports your conclusion that gravity and body movement and transport could account for blood in the alveoli?
Yes, sir. It's the article that I provided you by Dr. Gardner from 1958 in Quarterly Journal of Medicine, I believe it was. And although the main thrust of the article was not this particular point, he described an experiment in that article in which, after death, he placed a tube down into the stomach and placed barium, and he indicated it was 6 to 10 ounces. It takes about 8 ounces to make a cup, just to give you a general idea of the quantity. Then pulled the tube out, and then the body was handled in exactly the same way that all dead bodies were handled.
I'm sorry, doctor, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'd like you very briefly, when you say barium was injected into the stomach,
Yes.
the person was already deceased,
Yes.
and barium is something that the body doesn't make naturally. It's that if you get barium shows up on x-rays. You can follow it through the body, correct?
Yes, it's radio opaque, so it shows up as white on an x-ray.
So this was done as an experiment. Barium was placed into the stomach of a decedent, then to determine where that barium would end up going in the body, correct?
Yes, and 24 to 48 hours later, autopsy was done, lungs removed, and the lungs were x-rayed.
And what was the finding?
And the finding was that there was barium in the alveoli.
How do you account for barium getting in the alveoli if the man was dead? He wasn't breathing, was he?
No, he wasn't breathing.
How did the barium get there?
Simply by the movement of the body during the course of the normal transportation and autopsy procedure.
The same way blood would get there in Miss Clarkson's body, correct?
Well, I think in her case it would be even easier to theorize because of the gravity effects of being in the upright posture for many hours prior to all these additional things happening during the course of transportation and autopsy.
As a matter of fact, in that experiment, doctor, the barium would have to actually go up the gastric course, if you will, up the esophagus, into the air passages, back down into the bronchial trees, then down into the alveoli, correct?
Yes, sir.
In this particular case, based on the facts and circumstances that you know about Ms. Clarkson, the only thing that would have to happen is the blood and spinal fluid would need to drain back down the back of her throat into the air passage, and just through gravity and sitting there for some 12 odd hours, drain down into the alveoli, correct?
Yes, and in combination with all the subsequent body movements and so on, it certainly could, in my mind, make common sense that it could get there even easier than the barium did in that experiment.
So if there was a suggestion that gravity could not account for blood in the alveoli, that would be incorrect.
I could not agree with that.
What is the second of the three mechanisms that you said could account for the alveoli having blood in them?
Well, I think that it has already been testified to, and I certainly agree with statements that even though there was instantaneous incapacitation as a result of the gunshot wound, that did not stop the heart immediately. And there's abundant evidence for that in Ms. Clarkson, simply in my very limited part of the examination of her body. That is the brain and spinal cord. And my report describes brain swelling having occurred. And in order for that to occur, there would have had to have been some blood pressure for a time. In addition, we had other evidence that there had been some circulation for a time. There was subarachnoid hemorrhage, and it had also stained the arachnoid villi, which are on the dura surrounding the brain, and that only occurs if there's some blood pressure for a time, as far as all the evidence that we know of, both by our own observation and in the literature. So the heart was continuing to beat for a time. But during that time, it's not continually beating normally with the normal ejection fraction, and certainly there's no oxygen exchange occurring because no breathing is occurring. So the heart muscle is gradually going to get weaker and weaker and weaker as time goes on. And heart failure, as most people know, and some have had even direct experience with, during heart failure, fluid can accumulate in the lungs. So that would be a second mechanism by which edema fluid, for example, could occur in the lungs. And there's even reports that sometimes that heart failure type of edema in the lungs can be blood tinged, because if there's not normal oxygenation and circulation in the lungs, the capillaries tend to leak, and when they leak, the fluid within the capillaries can get into alveoli. And so sometimes that leakage is severe enough that blood cells can also get through those gaps.
And that would account not only for blood in focal areas of the alveoli, but it would also account for extra weight of the lungs. I mean, this liquid is leaching into the lungs, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there a third mechanism that you believe could account for blood in the alveoli and or the excessive weight of the lungs of Ms. Clarkson after death?
Yes, there is.
What is that?
And I would also preface it by saying that I'm not stating these as three separate categories in the sense that each one had to act alone. There's always a possibility that these could have acted in concert, or one or more combination of these things could have occurred to account for the increased lung weight, as well as part of the blood in the lungs.
Okay.
The third mechanism is, again, well known, well described in the medical literature, and it's called neurogenic pulmonary edema. And that is a condition in which head injury patients, for example, will get increased fluid in the lungs even though there seems to be no heart failure. The heart seems to be functioning fine by the usual clinical parameters and by the usual measurements, but yet the lungs are filling up with blood. Excuse me, I misstated. They're filling up with fluid. And that edema fluid, excuse me, were you going to say something?
No, I was writing myself a note.
That edema fluid can occur rather promptly. The most dramatic example I saw was a teaching slide in which an individual who had died of neurogenic pulmonary edema, as well as the head injuries that were involved and that had precipitated it, had actually a cone of white foam coming out of the mouth because the swelling edema fluid in the lungs was so profound it actually bubbled out of the mouth. And so it can be quite dramatic at times. The extent to which it occurred in this case, I can't say with any certainty, but it certainly is a well-described mechanism. It could have been a contributing factor here.
These factors could have acted, I think you were indicating, independently or together or some combination of the two, correct?
Yes, sir.
That one I thought of. I thought about pulmonary edema because when your heart doesn't work right, when it's not pumping hard enough, you get the pulmonary edema, and that's very common. So I thought of that one. The other one, the leakage, I didn't think about. That kind of happens like you said, in concert with the pulmonary edema. But the blood in the alveoli from the gravity thing, that was definitely my first thought. And I'm just so glad. I felt so stupid when Baden was up there saying it had to be breathed in. I was like, oh, I'm such a dumbass. Now I feel so much better about myself because I've forgotten a lot. So I wasn't being arrogant. I wasn't like just tooting my own horn. I've forgotten so much. It just made me feel better about myself because I thought, here I am, I'm a nurse, and I'm thinking it's gravity going in the alveoli, and this doctor's up here saying, no, it had to be breathed in, and I was just thinking, I'm so stupid, I forgot so much, and I was right all the time.
Each of these factors would and could medically account for blood in the alveoli, the excessive weight of the lungs, and none of them have anything to do with breathing or reflex movements, correct?
None would require continued breathing to occur. They could have occurred during the time circulation continued after breathing had stopped.
You indicated that there is published medical literature to support your conclusions and findings about, for instance, neurogenic pulmonary edema as well, correct?
Yes, sir, and I provided you with an article. The key article that deals with that was the one by Rogers et al., and I specifically chose that one, not necessarily because it's the most complete.
Unless you take it too late in the day, and then it's not so nice anymore.
Or most recent even, but because in that particular case series, there were two cases in which there had been a complete transection of the upper spinal cord, the upper cervical area. I believe in those cases it was an automobile accident or something. But the point being that among the several suggested mechanisms as to why neurogenic pulmonary edema occurs has been some mechanisms that require continued functioning of the spinal cord. And these two cases that were included in this specific article that had a complete transection of the upper cervical cord also had neurogenic pulmonary edema. And the reason I chose that article is because it's more directly applicable to Ms. Clarkson's case, because that was where her transection was.
Thank you for that, Doctor. I want to change gears one more time and ask you about the last kind of area that I want to cover with you, and that is concerning transection of the spine. You have referenced it in general. I want you to get a little bit more specific, if you wouldn't mind. Doctor, there's been a suggestion in this court that Lana Clarkson suffered a partial transection of her spine. And based on the fact that it was a partial transection of the spine, which was later completely transected during body transport, that she could have been breathing for 2 to 4 minutes after she suffered the injury, the gunshot wound that you examined. Do you agree with that proposition?
No, sir.
Can you explain to the jurors why?
Yes. It may take a few minutes. I apologize, but it's a complex question. When Dr. Bodden made that suggestion, I thought it was particularly, I had the impression that since he believed breathing had to have occurred, in order to come up with that as a possible mechanism for its continuation, I thought was important, and it was an innovative thought. And I think that anytime something like that is suggested by someone of Dr. Bodden's stature, that I need to take it seriously. And one of the things I think that's important for us to do as forensic consultants is to
You may proceed.
is to try to prove ourselves wrong. And so when that suggestion was made, I tried to go through a sequence of events of trying to reason through whether that mechanism was possible. Therefore, if I can take you through that sequence of thought, we know that the bullet entered the mouth and went through the back of the mouth and went through the vertebra, the upper vertebra, C1 and C2, and caused fractures in those areas. We know that it then entered the spinal canal, which suddenly changes the dynamics of the whole situation, because now the bullet has entered a closed cavity, brain and spinal cord, surrounded by spinal fluid. I think we briefly mentioned that yesterday. Now, when that occurs, we have a situation where what happens when bullets enter the closed cranial spinal vault? The manner of injury of bullets to the central nervous system is three. First of all, you have the crushing effect, the permanent wound path. Secondly, it creates a secondary or temporary cavity that is a pushing away of the tissue, and then it can partially collapse depending on the elasticity. The third way is that given some cases where you have a close contact or a contact wound, gases may contribute by the expansion effect on the injury to the nervous system. So in this instance, we've got at least two of those. I won't speculate about the gas effect, but I will say that there would have been a permanent cavity that we saw from the crushing effect, and then we would also have the temporary cavity effects. Now, it's important to realize that the central nervous system, unlike lungs, unlike muscle, is not elastic. It's very inelastic. So when it is spread apart suddenly by the temporary cavity effects, shearing forces occur, and that disrupts the nervous system tissue well out beyond the actual permanent wound path. So to go on and continue the sequence of thought that I went through, knowing that the 38 special caliber bullet diameter is about 9.6 millimeters, let's just say 9.5 millimeters for sake of discussion. The diameter from side to side of the cervical spinal cord at C1 level averages about 10.4 millimeters. And I've given you a reference with that regard. I think that was the Thiessen, Thijssen, on page 58. And so that documents the approximate diameter, the mean diameter of the spinal cord at that level.
So not to interrupt your train of thought, but just to make sure that point is clarified, the diameter of the bullet passing through and transecting the spine is less than a millimeter smaller than the full diameter of the width of the spinal cord at that location, correct?
Yes, sir. If we take the mean value of the spinal cord in, this situation. So in order for me to postulate that the difference in size, which is less than a millimeter, would leave, a fraction of a millimeter on each side of the bullet would have to act as a sort of cookie cutter and be so delicately going through the spinal cord, like a surgeon's scalpel under microscopic control or something, and somehow leave those fibers intact. And I can't reconcile that postulate with that same bullet at the same time, while it's in the cerebrospinal space, causing hemorrhages in the brainstem that are about 3.5 inches away, causing fractures in the roof of the bone over the eye globes about 5.5 inches away, and causing fractures as it passes through and continues on and hits the occipital bone, causes a complex fracture and actually a heaving fracture. Portions were pushed outward. These are all indicators. These remote hemorrhages, remote fractures, and heaving fractures are all clear-cut indicators of what's called secondary overpressure effects that has been well described in the literature on gunshot wounds. And it's inconceivable to me that the axons, even if it was possible for some to be still remaining after that bullet passed through, which I don't believe because the temporary cavity effects would completely shear them off as far as I'm concerned. Again, you don't need to take my word for it. There's going to be damage well beyond the actual bullet path. And the reference that I gave you to further document my opinion in that regard, you don't have to just take my word for it based on bullet wounds that I've examined in the brain and how far out the damage occurs beyond the permanent cavity. Dr. Omikan did a study that pertains directly to this point, in which he was examining the gunshot wounds of the brain, and they specifically selected cases in which the survival period was less than 90 minutes, so there wouldn't be a long-term opportunity for lots of secondary changes like hemorrhages and edema to be secondarily superimposed on the original damage the gunshot wound did. And he was able to prove that the axons are fragmented, completely disrupted for several millimeters beyond the actual permanent cavity, and even out to a radius of about, I think it was about a mean of 18 millimeters on each side of the permanent cavity. So we're talking about more than 2 cord diameters of axons that are so fragmented and so damaged it would be impossible for them to conduct any impulses.
First of all, as a matter of
Okay, we're going to stop there. We will pick up where we left off tomorrow. Right now, we are going to end the stream, and we are going to go to the Widow's Words murder trial, day 6. Defense cases starting today. So I will see you guys over there. If you're not joining me, we will be back for more Phil Spector tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and this will redirect. So if you're going to come watch the Widow's Words murder trial with me, I will see you in a few minutes. And remember, be kind to people, love your family, and Jesus loves you, and so do I. Bye, guys.